As Governor of Western Australia, you had the opportunity to meet with the Queen. Tell us your reflections. What was your experience like?
Well, she was very disciplined, quite low-key, never tipped her hand. My first impression was the way in which you approached it. There's an ante-room. There are usually 4 lots of people in the ante-room, each one looked after by a lady in waiting, and they all move round until you reach the final position before you go in. Well, the bloke in front of me was the head of the Foreign Office, and they wear a uniform when they go there. And as he came out the door at the end of his period with her, he points at me and he says, "Expect to discuss Brexit." He was right.
And what were her thoughts on Brexit, or was she more keen on your
no thoughts presented at all. What she wanted to know is what people in Australia might have thought about it. So that's what I talked to her about at that point of time, which was quite interesting because there was a little bit of a political divide there. Most of the people in the Labor Party leadership at that time opposed Brexit. They thought that it would diminish Britain and, all the arguments. On the Liberal Party side, there were the romantics, the people like John Howard and Tony Abbott, and they were very much for it. Bring Britain back to what it was before it was in Europe. Some of the folk like Peter Costello and others on the less romantic side of the Liberal Party were probably the same view as the Labor Party.
Does someone like Kim Beazley get nervous meeting the Queen?
No, I've met her many times before. A couple of times privately, but as part of a cabinet, quite a bit. She was out here a lot in the 1980s when the Hawke government was in power, and she and Bob Hawke got on extremely well. And that was, so it was always nice to see her out here. And when I was Leader of the Opposition, I also had occasion to meet her when she was out for a Commonwealth Day. So I'd seen a bit of her over the years, and she never forgets you.
That's remarkable.
She had an iron memory, and a lot of people have attested to that. She can remember what she discussed with you previously. I mean, it was a funny interlude, or a funny interlude. I didn't present it to her because you're not supposed to present gifts to the Queen, but Scott Morrison did. A couple of years later, after me, he presented that book on Winks, and he said, "Well, the Queen looked at it; she's fantastic." I'd given it to her 2 years previously, and she talked to the bloke who trained Winks every few weeks. And she must have 50 copies of that book sitting up on her shelves, because I bet everybody going to Britain thought, well, there's a good book on Australian horse, Winks.
Did you ever see the Queen let down her guard in those not so formal situations, or is every situation
No, I've never seen her let her guard down. Well, I have not personally seen her guard come down, nor have I heard of anyone who's told me about her guard coming down. That having been said, I never talked to her as a Prime Minister. And what I am told is that the Prime Ministers do have an opportunity to talk very frankly about the things that concern them, and they know they can talk about it very safely because there's one room in London which does not leak, and that's the room that she's in. And she was in. I sort of half expect that we've seen all of this, we've seen that, and she's going to come out on that balcony tomorrow and tell us that everything's okay.
Your friend Bob Hawke, do you have any recollections of conversations he might have had with you about the Queen? What was their relationship?
Oh, very good. I think Bob was of the view, Bob made assumptions about what she thought. And I think Bob, because South Africa was a big issue back in those days, the Commonwealth was engaged in South Africa heavily. The British government of the day under Margaret Thatcher was not in favour of boycotting South Africa, all of those sorts of things. I think the Queen absolutely was. She was in favour. She very carefully, slowly built the Commonwealth. That was not built by British statesmen. It was built by the Queen. And she would just travel and travel and travel through Africa, Caribbean, not quite as much to Asia, but particularly Africa. She wanted to make the Commonwealth their international institution. So that's down to her. And we only know it now. While all that was going on, nobody thought about it. But that's what she was doing. When you think of it, you translate the British Empire, against which there were multiple revolts all around the globe, to get the British out, and there they are, all happily going into this organisation whose initial membership is based on the British Empire. Think about that. And that is really good diplomacy.
She was the best. What about the future for Australia now? You're a Republican.
Yeah.
Where does that go from here?
Well, nowhere the next 3 years, because the Prime Minister made that absolutely clear. He has got his focus. He is focused on, insofar as referendums are concerned, he is focused on the first people's voice to Parliament. And as far as other things are concerned, he's very much focused on what the Labor Party usually refers to as working families, and he is very much focused on climate change. I don't think he wants to spend political capital at this point of time in that area. What happens after that? Well, that's the point of time when maybe some thought will be given to an Australian head of state. But one thing I certainly used to despise, and I think most of the, pretty well all of those who support an Australian head of state, is the notion that this should in any way be related to personal factors, any way related to the Queen, any way related to King Charles. That's not the issue. The issue is an Australian head of state. That's the issue. So, but it's not going to be an issue that you and I are going to be doing anything about in the next few years.
Were you surprised to see the polling today suggesting that support for the monarchy has increased in Australia?
Yeah, but what surprised me far more than the poll today, because I expected that, was that virtually the third parties, Liberals, no movement. Amongst Liberals, slightly down. Amongst the Labor Party supporters, way up. It's the Labor Party supporters who have driven that poll to the point where it's been driven now, which is really, I can't explain that, but I'm fascinated by it.
Just finally, what sort of king do you expect King Charles to be?
Well, I think he has already told us exactly what sort of king he's going to be. He's going to be king in behaviour as close to the Queen as he can make it, though he has a totally different personality. He has been way out there for years on a whole variety of issues, particularly those related to the environment. When he was out there, most people regarded him as an eccentric. Now he's basically mainstream. But I do not think that you're going to see him coming out proselytising anymore. I think he's going to, he knows how his mum operated. He's had plenty of time to absorb it and observe it. And so I expect he will be helpful. He will be there as she was for moments when comfort is required. She'll be there, he'll be there as she was for moments of great celebration. But he will be very circumspect. He will probably also, because the Queen worked very hard to keep him head of the Commonwealth, and part of her quiet diplomacy was to ensure that her position passed to him, when there's nothing in the Commonwealth's makeup which says that that should happen. But she organised it. So I suspect he's going to pay great attention to that too.
Kim Beazley, we really appreciate you joining us to share your reflections at such a momentous time. Thank you.
Thank you.